good for the audio listeners. All right, welcome to Section 31. This week, I'm still Dan Hammond. However, Rogue is in the midst of the annual prepping for the Comic-Con and the threading of the needles. So he is not going to be joining us. So joining me tonight is Matt Kirk.
Greetings.
Welcome in. Matt was at the North American Continentals last weekend, right?
Yeah, it's funny to say last weekend because I was there yesterday. I mean, technically I was there today, but last weekend, 2 days ago.
Excellent. So I will be peppering Matt with questions about what went down, and that's probably going to be the limit. We'll talk about the playtest as well that you did. Was that Sunday? Was that yesterday?
That was yesterday. Right.
Yesterday. All right. Very good. And I think we'll just go from there. So tell me about the trip. How long have you been planning on to go out to this shindig in the Midwest?
The thought had entered my mind probably February or March or so. I had sent Jeremy Benedict a note on the Trek boards and said, hey, do you have any floor space that I could perhaps inhabit that might, make this financially feasible? And he said, oh yeah, come on out. We got a guest room and the whole thing. And I said, oh, all right. And he said, just if you don't mind cats. And he said, yeah, cats are fine, whatever. So went ahead and took a couple of months to save up some money for the plane ticket and set it all up. And there was a lot of waiting. I got the plane ticket probably June or so. So it was about 6 weeks of I was testing a lot. I knew I was going to play in at least the TUI Continentals, and it was a very last-minute decision to even bring a 1E deck. I had no wherewithal of what had been going on recently, so I just kind of grabbed an old deck and made sure that it wasn't missing anything important. So I flew out on Thursday and got picked up by Jeremy at the airport on Thursday afternoon, about 4 o'clock. Stopped by his place briefly to drop off bags, and then we were off for the Day Zero event, which was he works at a kind of vintage arcade type place called Fallout Shelter Arcade. Mm-hmm. And if you remember any of the old virtual world sites back from the late 90s, early 2000s with the Battletech and the Red Planet and Old School LAN, anyway, you jump in a big enclosed pod and you have a large screen in front of you with lots of supplementary screens. And if you're playing Battletech, it's that universe. You're in a giant robot shooting missiles and lasers trying to blow each other up. The Red Planet is an alternate future with racing cars on Mars, and that was lots of. I enjoy Red Planet a lot more. Most everybody else was more interested in Battletech, and that was okay because they had two different sets of vehicles available. So Jeremy and I played some Red Planet. Most everybody else was playing Battletech. We teamed up to do some group stuff every once in a while, but that was a good time. I did not have a good time that evening. There was something that I had ingested that day that made my night very unpleasant, and so I missed all of day one. I stayed. Oh. I stayed at Jeremy's place just recovering, and it was not the way that you would want to spend a day on vacation. I was getting a paid sick day that wasn't a sick day. But thanks to Jeremy and his wife, Naomi, they were very gracious and got me a couple of things from the store and kind of, nursed me back to health. And Saturday morning, I was not 100%, but I was, enough that we got in the car and we went down for TUI Continentals. So that really was kind of like the first card game stuff that I had done all day or done that weekend.
And that was you said that was Friday?
Saturday morning was
TUI
Continentals. Yeah, I missed 1E Continentals altogether. I understand that Kevin Yeager and his Borg deck won, so not that was surprising anybody.
What made you go with Romulans for TUI?
Well, a couple different reasons. Um, the last time I had actually played in Continentals was 2013, and that was at Gen Con. And that was the farthest I had ever advanced in something in one of the events that was that big. And I got to the semifinals, and I played against Neil Timmons, and we had both brought Romulan resource denial decks. I was kind of going for a different angle, the kind of standard far-seeing eyes, go get rid of all of your exobiology and then lock you out with an exobiology wall so you can't do any of your missions. And Neil's deck was focused on completely draining your hand and getting you stranded in space, and then getting all the rest of the ships out of your deck so that you would be completely disabled, and then he could run the last half of the game. It worked pretty well on me, and I was just kind of, had my eyes open and said, all right. So I kind of tucked that away in the back of my head. If I was ever going to play in a tournament that, I needed some serious firepower, I might call that one up. So I started looking at it after I had, got the plane ticket, tested it for a few weeks, made some tweaks. And I think it would have done a little better in the second half of the event, and because while it was very good at completely locking people out, I locked, I think, 3 people out, like completely disabled people, where it was their turn and they couldn't do anything. It had trouble capitalizing on that. I didn't actually finish 2 of those games were mod wins for my opponent because I couldn't get ahead of them on win conditions. So had I played something a little speedier, or maybe just like I'd also brought Rainbow DS9 and Matt Frid's speed Borg deck. So had I played one of those, might have had a little more success to make top 4, and then I definitely would have played the Romulans in the top 4 for the hand denial stuff. Having witnessed Mr. Yeager's mastery of his Borg assimilator, that seemed like a very disheartening deck to play against, and I would have really liked a chance to be able to strip all the toys out and see what he would have done for his plan, B or then C, or maybe then what. But no, I had a good time, and moral victories, good, but they don't get you victory points,
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking just glancing at the deck. 60 cards feels huge without. Did you have any downloading, or was it just?
Oh yeah, I mean the goal of the deck was to get Galgathon plus a commander out as early as possible to start the hand disruption, and I was doing that like clockwork. I had 3 different christenings. I had attacking. I had 3 copies of Karis and Galgathon, and I also had a couple copies of How Would You Like Trip to Romulus. And there was enough grease in the deck that I was able to go dig for stuff if I needed to, and also to stall out the opponent. There was one game, actually, my worst draw all day. I found 3 copies of Saurus, the non-unique guy, where you can execute the order and put him underneath the deck, and then he looks at your opponent's hand to take an interrupt or an event out. And so I drew a card just thinking, well, if I get Galgathon or the commander, okay, I'm halfway there. And I drew and I didn't get anything. And I said, well, what if I happen to catch this guy with a handful of events or interrupts? Okay, so I played all 3. And then used the first one, and he only had 1 event in his hand. I said, oh, all right, well, I still got 2 guys, and he doesn't have any toys, so okay, that's fine. The deck was also using Gateway Historical Research, and that was another backdoor way. Although more often that would go get Tal who would then team up with Karis to make sure they had an interrupt in their hand, so that when you played your Romulan dude, then you would get to go download something out of your deck that you were needing to be more helpful, and then they would have something in their hand when you move Galgathon that they would discard. I stranded Chris that way. I got him destaffed in space and then stripped the other ships out of his deck. Nat Curtin was the same way in the last game. He had the Centaur out, got stuck at his space mission, and had to discard the Ganges to a Galgathon. And for the rest of the game, I kept saying, well, okay, so how about Zoza? And he's like, no, don't have that one. Okay, how about Bjorn's Scout Vessel? No, don't have that one. And so he finally said, I don't have any other ships in my deck. I just concede. It's like, all
right. You know, that guy, I mean, I can imagine back when it came out, there were only so many cards. Now you've got, what, double, maybe?
Yeah, there's a fair bit more. And I was, the deck had the hardest time against Starfleet because it had enough disruption of its own if it ran lustful distractions and graph plating traps, and all of its toys now are all personnel. And if they're running Metron Arena, you can't do those away because they just come right back out. And I was shocked that there was nobody playing new Starfleet on at 2econ Nails. I actually almost built that deck and brought it because it's very strong.
Very good. Did you get? I'm looking at you didn't get a chance to play Kevin's TNG DS9.
I was set up for it, and after he had won the whole thing, I went up to congratulate him and just kind of gave him a wink, and I said, you only won because you didn't have to play me. And he's like, yeah, I know, you were playing Romulan discard. And I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I completely folded that deck. I'm like, and he ended up conceding to Jeremy Huth in the last round because Jeremy got ahead very quickly with androids. He was playing androids at a DS9, and I was sitting right next to him, and Kevin conceded like around 15 or 20 minutes into the game. I'm just like, what? I mean, at that point, he didn't care. He was 5-0, and he was locked for the first seed in the top, going into, he was locked for the top 4, so he didn't care. But yeah, he's like, yeah, you're the first person in like 50 games to beat me. Okay. Yeah. I would have really liked a chance to have faced off against that because that was one of the decks I had on my radar, and Ramen Discard was a good matchup for. Right
on. Well, that was a pretty good field. 10 people, not bad. I mean, not bad for a tournament this age, right?
Yeah, I was actually. I mean, it seemed like the online buzz was. It seemed like there was going to be at least maybe 12 or even 16, and so I mean, honestly, when we got there and there was only 10, it was a little disappointing. However, the people in the field were pretty strong, so I didn't have a single game where people weren't playing their decks to the best of their ability. So I mean, it was a very tough field, and there was a little bit of luck involved, but I mean, most of the people had an eye on the meta. They knew what tricks they needed to dance around for dilemmas, and there were. I'm trying to think of the newer cards that have come out. I got smacked around with Dragon's Teeth. Oh man, that dilemma. I mean, the Romulan deck's all 1 and 2 cost guys anyway, aside from maybe Data or Pital or Dinatra. And I had already used Dinatra on. I think he played Necessary Execution and then Dragon's Teeth. So he's like, well, okay, use Dinatra and then Dragon's Teeth. Oh, well, there goes my 5 cost guy, and yeah, let's kill some people. But no, it's very, very strong. I'm trying to think of what other new stuff that was out there. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the only newer dilemma that I can think of that I saw.
That's one of the things that I don't do well is read a meta going into a tournament. I usually, I just don't trying to find something that's different that I haven't played before, something that I want to play for a day-long event, and beyond that, it's come what may, The few times I've won a regional or something like that, it's because I happened to bring something that worked well, and it's certainly I can't claim any. I can't claim any design on that.
Yeah, I knew most. Well, I said most of the field. I knew a few of the major players going into the field, and I did a little bit of past tournament research on them. Kind of looked at what their play patterns were, and just kind of made a call based on that. And I only got The first round, Nate and I got paired up naturally.
Yeah, I was going to say, how loud was the sigh when you had to realize you're going to pair up with someone from your local?
How loud was the sigh when we realized that Nate didn't have a bye after winning Masters? It was like, what? How does he not have a bye in a continental? Anyway, yeah, that was a little weird. Nate continues to be not only a good player, but has the alien gambling devices tucked away so he can alter the laws of probability. And I dodged getting any all-consuming evils on him after I think about 15 consumes. He didn't hit a 1. And it was pretty bad. And I kept him on lock. I kept his hand empty, and he managed to do things like draw 3 cards, play Denatra, and then have alternate, or not play Denatra, rather, but draw only 3 cards, play other things, and then have Denatra and an alternate identity in his hand together. When I wasn't able to keep it out of his hand in the same turn. So, it was a beating. And it was good that happened in the first round. There was also some kind of informal something or other that happened. I mean, and I got a text from him when I turned my phone off of airplane mode when I landed, and I was like, Nate texted you. We're on a tag team. What does that mean? And so then I looked at the 4 teams, and had I managed to finish the game against Chris Sonsby, I think we would have won on the day, because I think Kevin was paired up with Mark, who was my second round opponent. He was playing Borg Solver, and he was one of the only guys I was not really able to lock out on the day. Mostly just I didn't have a read on him. I didn't know what kind of deck he was playing. I kind of guessed a couple things with Karis early, like I didn't want to see knowledge and experience, and I didn't want to see at what cost, and he wasn't really doing that stuff. He was just kind of doing mega team Borg stuff, which I hadn't really seen or counted on, but it was good enough to get him the mod win. So I think we missed the tag team just barely. So no belts for us.
All right. So no 1E fun for you. You played some 2E. I see you played in the triples. Yes? No, you didn't play in the triples.
I did, actually. I played in the first round, and I qualified for the second table. However, I still needed to do some prep for the Excelsior playtest, so my third place seat for the round 1, I managed to I went ahead and gave it to the next guy down, which was Steve Nelson. So
very good.
He got to play, and I was furiously sticking sleeves in cards, and we actually, after they were done, Steve came back and helped out sleeving up decks so we could be ready to go when the playtest started. So it was a big thank you to Steve, and I'm glad that we got a chance to actually have enough participants for that to make it worthwhile.
I'm looking at Chris's his triples deck, and it looks like a pretty standard, not a very big. It's got some rescues, mostly rescues, a couple of poisons, some goes. Classic.
I wasn't at I wasn't paying attention to that table because I was occupied. From what I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong on the boards if you have evidence to the contrary. I think the reason that he took the picture with his trophy with Nat in the frame was because they were, helping each other out in the last table, and Chris managed to get ahead. So, I mean, it's a community game, so you're gonna form alliances and that sort of thing anyway. I mean, Kevin, in the preliminary round, Kevin Yeager certainly used the fact that I was borrowing one of Jeremy's decks that had only 1s and 10s in it, and it was 1 go, 1 replay, and then toxins, utilize, and poisons. So he was using that to his advantage. He was, letting me stifle the next guy over, and I was, feeding off of him. So we kind of helped each other out too. So that's what you do. That's one of the things that makes triples fun.
All right. Well, then that leads to Project Excelsior and the playtest. So give us a little background for anyone who doesn't, who only listens to the show and has no idea what we're talking about.
So Project Excelsior is something that's been in the works now as a result of the findings of Project Awaken that Tyler Foltz's group did, I'm going to say more than a year ago now, that started late 2015. They published findings in 2016, and right after that, internally, we started working after Ross got promoted to brand manager. We started kind of pitching ideas to what was the best way to put this Awaken findings into practice, so it could actually, start improving the community and making it easier for new players and kind of lowering the learning curve of getting into 2E. That was the first try at that. Was the objectives that were sort of, they were like, oh yeah, those are okay, I guess. So we kind of set those aside and just focused on the card pool itself, because we knew that even without the objectives, that was going to kind of be the core of what the new format was going to look like. So the first playtest of that was at U.S. Nationals in April, and Maggie and the Chicago guys put a few of those decks together. I don't think they had an official playtest event like we had, but I know they got a few games in, and so we got a little bit of data from them. Richard New and I had been working on not only the card pool that the format would draw from, but also what rules we could modify to lower the barrier to entry and make it a little more friendly of a game, a little more fair of a game. We mainly wanted to avoid abusive mechanics like prevent and overcome and spending extra counters and excessive downloading and stuff like that. And we made a whole list. And so whenever we were adding something to the card pool, we had to go down the list and say, okay, does it fall any of these? Okay, no, that's fine. We can put it on there. After Maggie's team had gave us some feedback, we went ahead and advanced to version 2, which is the version that we sent to Jeremy for him to go ahead and print out decks for Continental's playtest. And we had 8 people, well, 7 people plus me. We had 8. We got to use all 8 decks. We made there's 4 headquarters in the 400 card pool right now, and we made 2 copies of 4 different decks, 1 for each headquarters. And they were pretty middle of the road. TNG Solver, Ferengi kind of meddling around with stuff, a little bit of Klingon treachery battle kind of stuff, and then a Romulan interference pile that's trying to hang out at missions and interfere with stuff.
What were the Ferengi doing if getting extra counters aren't in the mix?
They're just doing stuff like getting extra draws and putting stuff under Ferenginar, and getting to kind of the early stuff. None of the play equipment for free, and then treasure collectibles and all that. But Yeah, a lot of some skill gaining. There we put the two earlier rules, Rule 6 and Rule 76, where you can just stop guys to
Stop
draw
a guy.
cards and then
Yeah.
bounce the events right. Um, and while we definitely got some feedback that Ferengi were probably, if we were going for easier barrier to entry, Ferengi were probably not the way that we want to go. That TNG and Klingon definitely were okay as far as that went. We had everybody play 2 games where they used the starter deck as provided, and then we had those decks used about 60% of the pool, all told, put together. The other part of the pool that we didn't have in those decks, we had some of those available so that between games you come to the desk and you pick which ones you want, and she could edit your deck in between games. And I think universally people felt a lot better after the second game. They're like, okay, well, and that was really what we were looking for, was how do we change these to make them more fun for people, more accessible. And I played the Romulan interference deck, and it's funny because I had written that deck, and I don't know if I had just forgotten that we didn't put harried and harassed in the pool. That's the dilemma that kind of makes once under the breach work, because it guarantees that you're going to have a ship at their space mission. But anyway, we didn't. And Once Into the Breach was in the dilemma piles, and I could never make it work. And I heard the other Romulan guy saying the same thing. He's like, "This is useless. I can't do anything with it because I keep moving away." Like, oh well. So I think we both took out the Once Into the Breaches, and once we had kind of retooled the Romulans into something a little more conventional, just kind of more of a straight up solver with a little bit of like hand disruption. Like Terrace wasn't there when she used her skill to finish a mission, and you can take a card out of their hand. It's a little more incidental stuff like that. They worked a lot better. The second game was much more successful. And big thanks to all those guys who came out for the playtest. And Ken Tufts was there, and he got to play the Klingons against me, and we made copious notes that will be incorporated into version 3, which is due out after we have our San Diego playtest in 2 weeks on the 30th, which is 2 weeks from yesterday. We're going to have a playtest at Arby's, and it's not really a tournament. It's come out. If you don't have a deck, we'll have the playtest decks there, and we'll have the extra stuff. So if you want to just customize beforehand or bring your own, because the card pool is up on the article, so people can build their own decks and bring those. And we're not trying to stratify any kind of bracket or anything. We're just looking for playtest data for how people are liking it, what they think needs to be added or taken away, or what rules work and don't. We pretty much came to the conclusion, because right now in the rules we're stealing the infinite diversity rule of on your first turn you can spend 3 and download a ship. Mm-hmm. Also in the rules right now there is a mulligan variant where you can, if you don't like your hand before you start, you can shuffle it back in and draw 7 new cards. And you can do that up to 3 times, but each time you do it, you spend 1 less counter on the first turn. And pretty much every time, like I tried it once or twice, and it took up more time, which that was contrary to what we were trying to do with the format. We're trying to make it faster, and or multiple mulligans would take more time than it would on a first turn to just go download a ship for 3 counters. So we said, well, you're going to look through your deck at least once. Just leave it at that, because the rules are already established. It's familiar for players because they're doing infinite diversity. So we said, okay, well, so the mulligan rule, unless there's a lot of evidence to the contrary, I think will probably be on its way out for version 3. But we're not quite there yet. We're going to see if we can get any more feedback externally, and then the San Diego July 30 session will be our kind of final cut for version 3. Version 3 will be debuted, or I should say 0.3 will be debuted at Worlds in October, and we'll have another public playtest session there. I'm hopefully going to be there. Haven't finalized that yet, but I do have the plane ticket available. I haven't booked the flight yet, but I've got enough freaking flyer points. I can make that happen. Even if I don't make it out there, we're going to send the decks with somebody who goes, and the playtest decks, and not only the ones that we already have for version 0.2, we'll have the modifications for the pool in version 0.3, and we're also adding 2 more affiliations to kind of model what the eventual desire for Excelsior as a rotating card pool will be. That periodically you'll add different HQs to the pool, and that'll kind of change the meta and give you a different balance of power. So people who got a chance to play at Continentals, now they show up at Worlds, and there's a little bit different flavor going on. So yeah, that's and then after Worlds, we'll have one more round of kind of cleanup of the rules. We're going to finalize those with organized play, and then organized play is on board to make Excelsior sanctionable starting in November, so that it'll be legal for league play. And that's towards our goal of eventually replacing Academy. So we're excited about that. And I've got the creative team going crazy as far as we're going to have sort of contrived storylines to support what's going on in the card pool. We'll kind of give you we'll give you 6-week updates. The pool will update every 3 months. So the entry article will be maybe like the week before the pool releases or updates, that will say, okay, here's the results of last time, and if the Klingons have been marauding, it'll be who can stop their reign of terror, and then in come the Starfleet or Dominion or whatever, and so it just says a little bit of flavor add for that. The rotations will be based in part on tournament results, but also direct player feedback. We're going to have a forum devoted for it, so that anybody who's interested in the format can get involved in the discussion. And then we're really just trying to make it the best we can for the people who are interested in it. I said this at the playtest on Saturday. I'm not really married to any of the conventions that we've put in the document right now. I just want it to work. So if there's something that is in there that people think we can tweak and make a little bit better, I'm all for that. I just want a format that's going to be fun and interesting, and maybe get some older players back into TUI who are kind of tired of seeing the same abusive cards, and still playing constructed, but in more of a curated kind of pool. But you said
you were going to add 2 affiliations. Does that bump up the 400 card pool to 600 or something like that?
Yes. The eventual the model right now is that when Excelsior starts in November, there will be 4 headquarters like there is now, and then November through February. When February's update happens, then there will be 6, and then when May's update happens, there will be a maximum of 8 headquarters, so that when May, June, July, August, when August's update happens, there will actually be 2 headquarters that will leave, and 2 new headquarters will replace them. And the headquarters that leave will be determined by how in the last 9 months, what's been in the lower third, what's been successful, to play into the storyline expectation of these guys have been slowly eradicating, making room for more stronger species, and so then you bring in the next headquarters. That is not to say that those headquarters will not return later, perhaps with different themes or specialties for their headquarters, right? So you might see, if TNG Solver now, and later you might see TNG Battle, or you might see Ferengi counters maybe just for 3 months. The other benefit of having 3-month windows is that if something is terrible, it will only be terrible for 3 months before we can change it. So
and that could be 3 tournaments, right? I mean, if you play once a month.
Sure. And the desire is that there's never going to be stuff added to the pool that directly contradicts what the goals of the format are. Quicker games, less abusive stuff, easier entry. So as we focus on that stuff, the desire is that if the format does show success, perhaps we can get a little more, fancy as the time goes on. But I mean, for at least the first year, we're just going to be focusing on trying to make games the best we can, quickest, and trying to get the community re-involved with making the format good.
All right. Well, one last question. That's who's the team? What team were you working with for this?
Well, like I said, Richard New formulated the initial card pools that we used for the playtest. We've got interdepartmental cooperation right now. We've been talking with Ken Tufts on Organized Play. Ross is involved. I'm sort of the point man for it as far as actually producing the documents and making the final calls on what cards make it in and not. I've also been gathering all the playtest data. I am interested in adding a team member or two. So if you're interested, please shoot me a PM on the message boards and we can chat. But everything right now is very informal. We're just trying to get everything on the board, and we're still in the process of just collecting data right now. So as we get closer to November and we actually need to put people on a team, that'll be a more formal process. That'll be on the Trek CCG main page.
Right on. Well, it has the advantage of making deck construction easier because you have less options. So that's right away something that would entice me to come back for a 2-week tournament. So I look forward to it. I think I'm going to be, unfortunately, out of town in 2 weeks, but we'll see what we can come up with. And also, is there anything going on at Gen Con, playtest, with a small group of people coming out there?
There's nothing on the schedule as far as I know. I'm going to see, do you know offhand who's running the events out there?
Nope.
Is that you? Oh, okay.
Me and Charlie, I guess.
All right, I'll double check and see who's running any. Because I mean, they're great demo decks too.
Sure.
Just set people in front, and the decks that we made weren't minimal size, but they were pretty small. One of the format rules that we have right now is there's a 100 card limit on a deck. So including the 5 missions, that's a maximum of 95 cards between your deck and your dilemma pile. To again give you a hard cap as far as the length of time that a game will go.
Yeah.
The dilemmas, most of the dilemmas will actually have their effect and then go underneath the mission. So that's one of the things we have in mind when we want to shorten game length. We don't want hard time. We don't want stuff that doesn't go in underneath your mission. We want the game to advance.
Sure. Okay. Sounds good. Well, I'll be around to do any playtesting night. Usually we do some kind of playtesting on Wednesday night before the con starts, so maybe we can get something together back at the Granite. Is that the place where we go to? Anyway.
Yeah, I'll make sure I send the decks with you.
That'd be fun. Great. I think last year we did some 22nd century Starfleet Klingon pair-ups and mirror pair-ups, so maybe we can get some 2E this time.
That'd be great.
All right, excellent. Well, Matt, thanks again for your time. I appreciate you stepping in for Rogue, who is sewing away, and hopefully he will be recovered from the weeks of preparation and the days of the actual Comic-Con, so that in a week we'll be able to have him back on and get some insights about Comic-Con and what's been going on with him. But until then, thanks again for joining me, and I will wrap up. Thanks. Expand your power in the universe, and I will draw to end.